So today I'm going to continue with part 2 of a 3-part commentary. In the first part, in the previous episode, I talked about Mike Daisey and the Apple Factory and how his story about his trip to China to learn about the conditions of workers who were putting together Apple products resulted in him telling an incredibly powerful story that drew some of its power from the fact that bits of it were fabricated. This, of course, resulted in a huge loss of his personal credibility and the credibility of the movement, which he was so desperately trying to help. And so today I'm going to continue this 3-part commentary on the oversimplification of advocacy and the results of doing that. And so today I'm going to talk in very broad strokes about the phenomenon of Kony 2012. So Kony 2012 was a video posted on March 5th, 2012, and quickly became the world's most popular viral video of all time. And I don't think that means that it has the most views of all time, but it was the fastest growing single video of all time. So between YouTube and Vimeo, and I'm sure it's on other places, but between just those two, it's been seen more than 100 million times, which is especially impressive because it's 30 minutes long. And if you've ever tried to make a video and get people to watch it online, you know that getting someone to watch something more than about 2 minutes long is quite a feat. And so in this video, as I talked about with Mike Daisey and the Apple Factory, I want to talk about the idea of propaganda. And again, it is not the type of propaganda that you think of when you think of the Nazis. It is not, a giant government or a giant organization trying to brainwash an entire populace to do terrible things or anything like that. Propaganda is the messaging of a very strong message, convincing a lot of people of anything, good or bad, and but it especially taps into the emotional psychology of people to get them to respond very strongly to that message. So Kony 2012 is simply one of the most masterful pieces of propaganda ever created, as evidenced by the fact that it was seen 100 million times, within just a few weeks of it being published. So the elements of this propaganda was that it had an absolutely uncomplicated bad guy. The world's most notorious war criminal, as listed by the United Nations. It had completely uncomplicated victims of this war criminal, being kidnapped children in Africa who had then been made to be child soldiers. And then for the sake of Western audiences, there was an absolutely photogenic white bridge character in not only the filmmaker himself, but also his incredibly cute, in the neighborhood of about 5-year-old son. And then once the story of this war criminal was told, there were incredibly simple action items that everyone could take. You could sign their pledge, you could donate to their organization and receive, on a single or one or recurring basis, I'm sure, to help support their efforts, and receive an action kit, which would help you spread the word, which is the whole idea of their campaign, was to make Kony famous so that, politicians around the world would keep the pressure on to arrest him. And then, of course, you would share the video, which obviously many, many people did, which is why it was seen by 100 million people. And so it's very simple when laid out that way. And if you watch the video, all of the information I just gave is about all you would come away with. If you are a little bit more politically in tune, you would have noticed that the most prominently displayed United States politician was Senator James Inhofe. And if you're familiar with this show or progressive politics in general, that name is probably familiar to you as the country's biggest climate denier. And so, so you're watching the video and you think, well, he's a moron in a lot of ways, obviously, but, I guess he can't be wrong about everything. You can kind of let that go a little bit, but it should certainly be a red flag. But as more information came to light, it became clear that there was a strong connection between this nonprofit organization, Invisible Children, and the secretive Christian / political organization known as The Family, of which James Inhofe is a member. So more red flags. Of course, The Family is very much involved with the quote-unquote kill the gays bill in Uganda, which of course is the focus. Uganda is the focus of the Kony 2012 video. So you start to see that, lots of really interesting red flag connections are being made. And then to go even further, we get into all these issues of privilege that we've been talking about in recent episodes here on this show. And then you get into the idea of white savior syndrome and echoes of colonization. And so, what impact does it have to have, millions of sort of middle-class white people suddenly interested in what's going on in Uganda? How do Ugandans react to that? Well, when the video was played in Uganda, it was met with outrage. People were, throwing things at the screen and so on. So, once people had an opportunity to dig deeper into the details of the organization and the campaign, and then they got the word out about, some of the murkier details, there was a major backlash, which I'm sure in no small part contributed to the filmmaker of Kony 12 having a mental breakdown, resulting in him running around his hometown of San Diego naked, sort of clapping and shouting and doing lots of strange things. But I mean, it doesn't quite matter what exactly he was doing because he was running around the streets naked, and that's about the threshold to decide that he was having a bit of a mental break, regardless of his exact actions beyond that. So claims are made that the whole thing is a scam and that the whole video was produced to get people to donate to their organization and enrich themselves. And there were a few other conspiracy theories. I don't even bother, considering those. I don't bother doubting their authenticity. I don't think they set out to perpetrate a scam, but I do think that it was completely overly simplistic and that it left out, so many important details that in order for anyone to trust an organization and accept their message, you really have to trust who they are. And they didn't really talk about themselves very much, or, who they are, or where their connections are, or, where they get their funding, or, any of those sorts of things. That was all left out. And so when those things came to light, they were met with a huge backlash. So although I don't doubt their authenticity, I do think it was overly simplistic. And here is what I will leave you with. This is 6 sentences that I read in the previous episode in part 1 of this commentary. It was, these 6 sentences were not written about the trip to the Chinese Apple factories. They were also not written about Kony 2012. They are written about what I will be talking about in part 3. So please come back and hear that. But I will read them and reappropriate them as if they were written for Kony 2012. And they say, Kony 2012 will start a lot of good conversations. It might awaken compassion and concern. It will do good, but it will also start a lot of overly simplistic conversations. It is likely to inspire people to adopt inadequate solutions out of panic and expediency. It will do harm. And to me, that is absolutely what it comes down to, because when you try to take an issue as unbelievably complicated as interfering with, the police state actions of African countries as first world, primarily white countries wanting to come in and selflessly do good, you cannot help but run into an unbelievable wall of complications that this video tried to whitewash past, and was met with the inevitable.